welcome back, everyone, for our last class from amidst the snow and sleet of Maryland. Or hopefully the weather's better in Jerusalem, or a little certainly different. And hopefully everybody got the text that I just sent out not very long ago. If you didn't get them or you can't find them, let me know in the chat or something. But I think I emailed them to everyone. And I'll hand it back over to Malila for our learning.
Hi, hello everybody. It's amazing that it's the last session, so we're gonna gather in some more things. I really enjoyed the session that we did last week. And I was very happy that we got all the way into the way light and candles are, big symbols of life, the life of the psyche, or the life in the world, the life of the soul, and the singular uniqueness of each person's light that needs to be found and needs to be lit and needs to be given to the world. Yeah, so needed in this time, unbelievable. So we did that for last time, and it's a way of going into Torah learning by taking a theme in any parsha. I mean, one can stick just with the first verse. There's so much to do if you go further and further in. But what I'd like us to notice is that we went from very narrative reading to different kinds of midrashic reading, different kinds of more contemporary readings, that Zoharic readings, like that's the way, Jewish kind of civilization develops. It's this ongoing conversations with earlier strata, earlier voices, sometimes picking up on something that was, almost neglected in some earlier phase, and really making it grow and kind of magnifying it and amplifying it, which is a very interesting way of advancing a living culture, that because the gates of interpretation are open forever, then our ability to ask the text any question, our ability to find cracks and tiny openings in the verse so we can enter and look for interesting things is amazing. And we could be looking for what our heart desires. It can be wisdom about our world, it can be wisdom about our soul, it can be about whatever is there. We're just in that close conversation that allows the text to be suddenly bring forth things that who would have imagined. But we're going to leave the menorah. I wrote to Josh that I think there's just something I need to say about the menorah, which is that there's a psalm that is traditionally written in the shape of the menorah. It's Tehillim Samech Gimel, I think. I can't even remember, but I sent it to Josh. But I just wanted to say that we're talking about interpretation, commentary. It's very interesting that that there was a practice of drawing the menorah by writing down for each part of the candelabra. You had one verse, okay, and it's as if we are participating in lighting the menorah of the tabernacle, lighting the candle. It's like how interesting that somebody came up with that. So you find it in so many art pieces and folk pieces. You'll find that menorah with a beautiful psalm kind of written as on each part of it. Um, I thought that we would look today at the tail end of the parsha, which tells us the story of Miriam, Aaron, and their brother Moshe. Um, and and maybe say just a few things. I don't know what you've been doing with your parasha up till now, but Be'alotcha is a very, very rich parasha. And, if I just had to say it in just that overall view of the dedication of the Levites, right, the dedication of the Levites to be the ones who serve in the sanctuary, and the whole idea of Pesach Sheni, of having to construct structures and ritual structures that will allow people that cannot join the whole community in a given time to do the Pesach, to do the Passover, to sanctify or to create another time that people who can't be there, who are traveling, who are impure ritually, can come and do the Pesach Sheni, which also has got an interesting kind of direction that's been picked up and taken into in contemporary times. And then there's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful part of the Parsha, which is the part about God commanding Moshe to build the 2 silver trumpets, right? The 2 chatzotzot, to build the chatzotzot, Nachon, which brings in this whole audio, the soundtrack of the story in a certain way, but it's about having the sounding of the trumpets as something that is a way of convening the congregation, of proclaiming, going out to war, about warning, and it received very, very beautiful. I'll just say it in passing, but I think it's beautiful if any one of you want to pick it up as something as a personal kind of project. But this idea of aselecha chatzotzrot, make for yourself chatzotzrot, was read by the Baal Shem Tov, who was the great person who initiated, or who was the inspiration for the Hasidic movement in the 18th century, to read the word chatzotzrot, right? That's the word in Hebrew for trumpets. He reads it as chatzi tzurot, half of a shape. Okay, chatzotzrot. He reads chatzi tzurot, and he develops it in the direction that says, when we are told to create the chatzotzra, it's because we and God are 2 halves of one whole. Okay? Which is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful idea, that gains importance in the Hasidic movement, which is a very spiritual movement. But to say that we are chatzi tzura, we are a half of a whole, and our other half is the divine. So I wanted, couldn't leave you without saying that, because that's one of the beautiful teachings of the Parsha. And then we have all this very desert stories, hunger, exhaustion, desire to go back, being on the path is too hard. We just want to go back to what we know. We want to go back into the habitual. We want to go back to the melons and the leeks of Egypt. We want to go. It's too overwhelming to go and venture out onto a new path. I think that's very true in our lives for many of us. Yalla Chevre, let's keep the chat a little quiet so I can concentrate on all of you. If we got everybody on, yeah, that's much better. Okay. That I think it's part of what happens on every path. It can be on a physical path and it can be on a spiritual path. But at some point we get exhausted. We get exhausted from the hardships. We get exhausted from the unfamiliar. We get exhausted from the great unknown. And we just want to lean back onto the familiar, even though we know that we're out of there. Like, I think our world, in a certain way, is in that moment now that we can continue thinking of it all the time in, like, according to paradigms we know. And there's something so frightening about having to look at things as they are and figure out what to do about them. But the people in the desert are like, they're fed up. They don't want to eat, spiritual food. They want to, they want steaks. They want fish. They're hungry in a very physical sense. And this wondrous bread from heaven is difficult for them. It's not what they want. They want what they know. They know what they know, and we have the whole story of what happens there with the meat that they eat from the Slav. How do you call that bird in English?
Quail, yeah.
Quails.
Yeah.
But I think that we're not going to get into the story of the quail, but I think the fact that before all this happens, Moses says one of the most amazing verses in Torah where he says, did I conceive these people? Was I pregnant with them? Are they mine? That you say to me, carry them like a caregiver carries a nursing baby? I mean, a nursing infant or newborn? Like, Moshe is totally exhausted. Like, the leadership itself is like on the ground. It's just, on their knees because it's so frustrating to lead these people. But the fact that he can say that image of the leader as a person who has to find a way to gently carry an infant in their bosom so that that infant will survive, right? But in the case of that dialogue, Moshe is saying, God, you chose this, right? You wanted this to happen. Help me. I have to feed them. There's no meat here. There's no real water here. You put me in this place. And so I think that's it's a very dramatic aspect of the parsha. And then, to become a little more dramatic, we have the whole story of Eldad Umeidad, which is a great story unto itself, which is that Moshe is given the great idea to have counselors and sages and elders that will hold, the governance with him, and that people will attend to them. They will tend to the people, and there is a story which is again central in Jewish mysticism of the elders gathering, the 70 elders gathering around Moshe, and the moment of bestowing the Holy Spirit. Right? There's like Ruach HaKodesh. There's a sanctifying of these 70 people, and then Nachon, as a side story, we have the story of Eldad Umeidad, who are these two guys who don't come out to stand with the 70 elders. Okay? Bichlal, the idea of having elders, that it's so important that whoever is leading any kind of community doesn't stand alone, but that he or she have to find a way of kind of expanding and relegating that authority, and that there's a very powerful ritual moment of elevating the people who are willing, who are in that role. But Eldad Umeidad, interestingly enough, do not leave the camp, and yet when this prophetic moment, this revelatory moment comes over the people who are standing with Moshe, it happens also to Eldad Umeidad, even though they're in the camp. And somebody rushes to Moshe to say, right, Moshe, something's wrong. These people are, maybe they're in ecstasy, maybe they're in a visionary moment, maybe, and, kind of go arrest them, right? Klaim, go arrest them. And Moshe says that amazing verse, Mi ten kol am Hashem nevi'im. All I could wish, why are you so angry at them? All I wish is that all the people of God would all be prophets, that we would all kind of rise up to that level of intimacy with the divine, that we can be in that relationship. It's an amazing, amazing story, Eldad Umeidad. We're going to come to it again in what we're going to be doing now. And only then do we come to our story of Moshe, Aaron, Miriam, the leprosy, the prayer. So just before that, just before we jump into that, I just want to ask if anybody has a question of anything having to do with this, with the parasha. Oh my gosh, no questions. Okay. Okay, you might come up with a question. So, by the way, have you been studying the parasha?
About 10 or 11 of the people here are part of the adult B'nai Mitzvah class, and then several of them are not. So
So you have studied it or not?
just a little bit in the class, not that much. So
Okay,
that's-
anyway,
but
for whoever it's a first time, 100th time, seventh time, that's the fun of Torah. It's always so interesting to just go back and delve into it. But that's the parasha of Be'alotcha. It's a very, very, very rich parasha. So,
I think Carol has a
yes,
question. Yeah.
Carol.
I jumped in a little bit late. You may have addressed this, but why does Miriam get punished and not Aaron? Is it because Aaron is one of the 12? Is that because he's considered a priestly person?
Well, we're going to start that right now.
Okay.
We're going to start the story of Miriam right now. So we'll have a chance to kind of address that, because I think it's a question we all ask, right? We all ask ourselves, what's happening here? So we're going to read now the chapter 12, which is the chapter of the story. And what I brought is a selection of different midrashim, and different kind of tales that kind of build up the personality of Miriam as the very important third in this triumvirate, in this trio of leadership. She's a very important part, and we have to understand why, and we're going to do that in a moment. But first we have to read the story itself. Can I have a volunteer from you lovely English-speaking people to read the verses in English so that the story becomes ours?
I'd be happy to do that.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks.
Oh, good. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we hear you beautifully.
Great. Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman he had married. He married a Cushite. They said, Has God spoken only through Moses and not through us as well? God heard it. Now Moses himself was very humble, more so than any other human being on earth. Suddenly, God called Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. So the three of them went out. God came down in a pillar of cloud, stopped at the entrance of the tent, and called out, Aaron and Miriam. The two of them came forward. Hear these my words. When prophets of God arise among you, I make myself known to them in a vision. I speak to them in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is trusted throughout my household. With him I speak mouth to mouth, plainly and not in riddles, and he beholds God's likeness. How then do you not shrink from the speaking against my servant Moses? Since, oh, I'm sorry, still incensed with them, God departed. As the cloud withdrew from the tent of meeting, there was Miriam stricken with snow white scales. When Aaron turned toward Miriam, he saw that she was stricken with scales, and Aaron said to Moses, O my Lord, account not to us the sin that we committed in our folly. Let her, excuse me, let her not be like a stillbirth that emerges from a mother's womb with half flesh eaten away. So Moses cried out to God, O God, pray heal her. But God said to Moses, if her father spat in her face, would she not bear her shame for 7 days? Let her be shut out of camp for 7 days, and let her be readmitted. So Miriam was shut out of camp for 7 days, and the people did not march until Miriam was readmitted. After that, the people set out from Hazeroth and encamped in the wilderness of Paran.
Thank you. Thank you for reading that story. So before we proceed, we have to do what we do in any kind of Torah study at any time, which is to ask questions. Okay, let's just ask questions for a moment. Okay, I'm not going to give answers to the questions, that's not my job, but our questions are supposed to kind of make the story more airy. Okay, questions. Yes, Evan.
So I'm struck by the description of what's wrong with her, what's been put on her as she was stricken with snow white scales. There's something that's been put on her. But then Aaron says, let her not be like a stillbirth that emerges from its mother's womb with half its flesh eaten away, which is to me a very different image from having white scales on your skin. The idea of having flesh eaten away or something removed is different. And so the difference between the description of what's physically happened to her versus what Aaron seems to be worried about happening to her, I'm curious about that.
Okay, so first of all, I would even go one step backwards of just saying, so what happens to her? What is happening to her? And why? And as the first question was, why? Why is it happening, right, that Carol asked? Why is it happening to her? Okay, any other questions? It doesn't have to be, like I'm just putting on the light here because it's going to be dark in a moment. It can be any question. Any question that's interesting as a way of feeling the text. Yeah.
I have, it's interesting to me that God decides to speak in riddles to other people, but speaks plainly to Moses. I wonder, why does he have to speak in riddles? But that's the question.
Okay, right, because this is the chapter that in all kinds of Jewish theologies is always brought. It's this verse that Robert was just referring to that has to do with the difference between all of the prophets. There have always been prophets, right? Prophecy is it's a human experience. It's an experience in the world of the children of Israel. But God says here, there is a difference between prophets and Moses. Okay, just like in Islam, they would say there's a difference between all the great prophets, including Moses and Jesus and Muhammad. He is of a different league of a different league of prophets, which is generally defined as is said in this verse, that there is no intermediacy. I speak with Moses face to face. It is not through visions, through dreams, through riddles, through odd things that I see, that I find myself needing to interpret with a no. It's not through that. There is no intermediate between the intimacy between God and Moses, right? He says, like a person and his beloved friend. I speak to him mouth to mouth, face to face. Yeah, let's hear some more questions. Susan?
Well, I just was curious. This is kind of late in the game for Miriam and Aaron to now be questioning Moses's choice. I mean, she's been with him, Jethro saved him. And so I'm surprised that why didn't Moses just defend himself, which he's probably already had to do? So that would be my question.
Yeah, absolutely. Any
I'll-
other questions?
I'll just add in something. I mean, it's interesting that it's interjected in about Moses's humility at that point. Maybe it's because he's not responding. Why is it mentioned about his humility at that point? I guess would be the
Good question.
the question.
Good question.
What are we? Why are we all of a sudden given this, superlative about Moses's humility?
Yeah, it's the fun of looking at a story that every part can start becoming interesting and we can ask questions. Why are the three of them called out? Why not two? Yes, Brian.
I have a two-part question. In verse 7, it says, "He is my servant Moses is trusted throughout my household."
Yeah. Ne'eman
that-
Beiti.
Yes, it's a interesting, I guess, metaphor. And also it says, Moses beholds the likeness of the Lord. Not even Elijah, the prophet, beheld the likeness of the Lord, because it was said that to behold God is to die. It seems like there's a contradiction there.
Right. The contradiction between the idea that, on the one hand, in the same book of Exodus, we have an idea that says a human in their human body, in their human state, cannot behold the divine without being extinguished, like without passing out into another world, right? And on the other hand, very clearly and very openly, the Torah says in the same book that Moshe has the experience of speaking with the divine as a person has with their friend. Okay? Which clearly we do not die when we speak with our friends. Okay? That there's an ability to stay sustained in his body and not being totally taken from an ecstatic place or out without returning. Yeah, I think it's an amazing statement that we have, and it's a paradox that we have in the book of Shemot. We have it because there's a suggestion that Moshe can only see the back side, right? The back side of the image of the divine, and not the front side. And on the other hand, here we see that it's the front side, right? I think this was very, very important for many theologians because, first of all, it clarifies in a very strong way that in the Jewish Bible, God surely has a form. God surely has a form. He has a persona. It's a very powerful personality that we can talk about, right? He's powerful. He's wrathful. He intervenes in history. He's very male. He doesn't have a consort. I mean, we have all kinds of things we know about. We know about God. Can be like fire. Coming too close to God can mean death. And Moses has that incredible, right, that unique ability to be with God, right? And I think that's why you have all these traditions that say that the soul of Moshe transmigrates or occurs and recurs and sparks in every single generation, right? It never leaves the people. That you have the people that have a spark of the soul, the great soul of Moshe. Any other question before we talk about? Yes, Carol.
Well, it's not a question, but I just had a theory about the Miriam being stricken with the scales and not her husband, not Aaron.
It's not her husband. Brother. It's her brother.
Oh, it's her brother. Okay, right. But it's to show her as an example of somebody being an outcast, like the Cushite woman is being seen as an outcast.
Well, we don't know if the Cushite woman is seen as an outcast at all. We know that Moshe and Aaron are speaking about the Cushite woman that Moshe has taken. We don't even know exactly what a Cushite woman is, and we clearly, the text of the Torah is very stingy and full of lacunae about what did they say? What did they talk about? What was the problem? First of all, notice the language. Vatedaber Miriam ve'Aaron, which in Hebrew syntactically means, and Miriam spoke and Aaron, okay? Against Moses or about Moses, about the Cushite woman that he took. So, right, we have a question. Why? What's the problem? What's the problem with the Cushite woman? What's the problem with Moses? And I think it's a good opportunity to jump into the Midrash. So, we are going to go to page number 2. And okay, let's look at the way the Midrash it's not just Midrash. We're talking about Rashi, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki in the 11th century in France, the great commentator of both the Bible, the Tanakh, and also of the Talmud. Okay, he sat in the north of France. He had many daughters. I think they were learned, and he was a big, amazing, he had that mind of being able to create the commentary of the full codex. So let's see what he does. And what generally Rashi does is that he brings earlier midrashim in order to make a claim of what he wants to say. So let's look at what Rashi says. Miriam and Aaron spoke. And now he's quoting the Sifrei. The Sifrei is a midrash on the books of Numbers, on the book of Numbers. So it says, she opened the discussion first. That's why, right? So one question Carol was asking, why is she punished? Because syntactically in Hebrew, it doesn't work so well in English, by the way. Vatedaber, it's in singular feminine. She spoke with Aaron about Moses. So it says, she opened the discussion first. Therefore, scripture mentions her first. And how did Miriam know that Moses was separated from his wife. So let's stop here for a moment. Wow. That's what is the problem that they're talking about. The problem that they're talking about is a very, very serious one. Moshe is married to a Midianite woman, right? Very close to our family and to the family of Moshe. And he stops living with her as a husband and wife. He stops having sexual relationships with her. And Miriam is very concerned about this. According to the sages, the Torah does not say what they spoke about, which the Torah generally tends to kind of keep it back there. Okay, why did Cain kill Abel? What were they arguing about? What was the content of the conversation? We have to fill it in, and I think that's the fun of Jewish culture. You fill in the gaps. You fill in the gaps, and it's very open how much you want to do it. Now, it's very clear that the direction it's going to go to is that it has to do with a woman, and it has to do with the woman that Moshe married. Okay, it doesn't say exactly what it is, but let's see what the Midrash says. We're talking about a 2nd century Midrash, this very early Midrash. Okay. How did Miriam know that Moses was separated from his wife? Rabbi Natan says Miriam was beside Tzipporah. Tzipporah is the Isha Kushit, is another name for the Cushite or Midianite woman. At the moment when it was said to Moses, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Remember, I just told you that that's the story that happens just before this in the same parsha. The two guys that are prophesying. When Tzipporah heard this, she said, woe to the wives of those men, if they become involved with prophecy, for they will separate from their wives, just as my husband separated from me. Okay? עכשיו, you sit and think to yourself, who's the person that wrote this very creative midrash to say, this is the problem. There's a real problem. The problem is that Moshe has separated himself and become celibate. Right? God says to him, come, be with me. He becomes Isha Elohim. He becomes living with the divine. And he separates from the earthly woman. Okay, so that's a midrash. This is somebody who came and thought, what is the problem of these people that are divine and saintly? Is that they might be forgetting that they have families, that they have real women, that they're not filling their conjugal bichlal rights in a marriage. And it's said in a very, very empathetic, the Midrash is very, very empathetic and sympathetic with Tzipporah, right? It's saying, you can see her crying out like, oh my God, woe to the wives of Eldad and Medad. If they're going to go in that direction, these women are going to find themselves alone. Yeah? Anybody want to say something about it? It's very, very powerful midrash. And also, by the way, it makes us think, yes, Miriam should say something about it. This is her younger brother, Moshe. She might have something that she feels is not so okay here. Yes, Evan.
You said something about who was saying this. Well, Rabbi Natan would have had a wife and kids, right? Like all the sages in the Talmud were married, had families. So
mostly, yeah.
because we don't have a tradition of monasticism, or at least not celibate monasticism. That idea that it would have been so important for Moses to not neglect his wife just because he's a prophet would have been something we continue on in the tradition, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But it's coming through this story, in the Sifrei, in the Midrash, that kind of brings out the question of the relationship between people that choose a very intensified spiritual life and their ability to sustain their life as men in their family life. And it's true, we do not have a monastic tradition. We cannot say, of course, being celibate, or being, like in Hinduism, being brahmacharya and not becoming a householder has a whole, system culturally. But here, Miriam is overhearing the anguish or the sadness or the frustration of Tzipporah. Yeah, somebody raised their hands. Yes, Deborah.
I'm just thinking, we don't have a monastic tradition now, but there is evidence, right, that the folks out at Qumran in the early centuries were living a kind of monastic lifestyle. So I can't help wondering if this might have been something that was in the air around the time that this midrash was written.
Yeah. I mean, Nachon, they had a very kind of strict communal life of men. There were some women, and it was a men's thing, yeah. It was the ancient manosphere, but no, it wasn't the manosphere. It was very much something else, I think. It was very extreme purity and devotion, very extreme, and very separated from Jerusalem, that was seen as corrupt, just as Jesus says so beautifully, when he comes to visit the temple, like, you've turned my father's house into a whorehouse, right? They don't want to play in this political, they don't want to be in that world, and they depart into the desert. But the idea that a woman who is not from the tribes of Israel, and that her story and her sadness is brought in Midrash by Miriam overhearing her speaking about Eldad Umedad. That, that gets, a star as an excellent Midrash, okay? Where you say, whoa, that was an incredible creative move. So let's just see what it continues saying. From that story, Miriam knew that Moshe had separated himself from Tzipporah, and she told her brother Aaron. Okay, these are the three brothers. And if Miriam, who did not intend to disparage him, was punished in this way, how much more so one who speaks disparagingly of his fellow? So I want to stop for a moment and say that this is another direction that the sages have taken this story into, which is to say, let's take the story of Miriam and Aaron speaking about Moshe, and from our point of view, it's a paradigmatic story about Lashon Hara, or it's a paradigmatic story about something that nobody's paying attention to in the world at this moment, which is called the ethics of speech. What's coming out of our mouths? Our responsibility for what we say. Our responsibility for the fact that we might be saying negligently, bypassing something that we could easily have not passed on, and it can roll into something that is very bad, okay? And I think the whole idea of lashon hara, of being wary of speaking bad talk, okay, bad speech, is brought in to this story, and it's saying Miriam didn't even mean to say something bad against him. She was concerned about this story, and if Miriam was stricken with leprosy or scales or something terrible, that's clear, something that renders her, first of all, ritually impure. She has to leave the camp. She has to be outside of the camp, like any person who has any kind of I don't know how to say it. Any person who is in a state of ritual impurity because of any kind of body liquids that are coming out of his body, because of semen, because of illness, women who are menstruating, anybody who's in that state of ritual impurity, according to biblical law, they don't stay in the camp. They hang out outside of the main camp until they're ritually pure again, and then they come back. The place is filled with people like that. It's like it's not a moral impurity. It's a physical mostly, and it's a ritual impurity. So they stay out, and that's the story here, that Miriam is ritually impure. She has to be outside of the camp for 7 days. Okay? So the story here, Bemet reads it as saying, look, she didn't even want to say anything bad against him. So think of the punishment of a person who really does lashon hara, who goes around saying bad things about other people. Yes, Val. You have to.
No, the question is this 7 day, which is a big number for us, it's a full week, is this meant, whether you intend it or not, to be a period of reflection, not just sitting on your duff and saying, I'm going to get through this?
Well, I don't think so. I think first of all, this is a very ancient society where purity and impurity are so central as a way of bichlal navigating community, and there are always a big chunk of people who are outside of the camp, who are ritually impure, and it only becomes, I think, a question of more moral pondering, when we come into the world that doesn't have a temple anymore, or doesn't have a tabernacle anymore, and that then a lot of these purity and impurity things become questions of the psyche and of consciousness and of morality. But in the story itself here, right, as we see also in the Parshat Mitzorah, and different people who have, for example, any person that has a contagious disease, they have to go out, they have to spend time outside of the camp, and then they join the camp unless they die, right? And they have to go through a ritual re-entry. A woman who is menstruating sits 7 days outside the camp and then re-enters, right, by ritual immersion. So I think that in the biblical sensibility, it's real. Purity and impurity are very real. So you just have to abide by it. What's very interesting is that when we're reading Midrash, in Midrash, they're already taking it to a totally different level. It's about speech. It's about what do we say about other people and what can that imply. Yeah, very fascinating. So let's just see what the Midrash continues saying in the way that Rashi brings it. The Cushite woman, right? The verse says the Cushite woman. This teaches that everyone acknowledged her beauty, just as everyone acknowledges the blackness of a Cushite. Cushite by gematria, by numerical value, means of beautiful appearance. Okay? So first of all, they're also interested in this word. What does Cushite mean? Is it a woman that comes from Cush? What does it mean? Does it have to do with a color? Is it about the color of a skin? Right? And here they say a Cushite woman means an outstandingly beautiful woman. So they want to say Tzipporah was an outstandingly beautiful woman. Okay? Ki isha kushit lakach. Moshe took this Cushite woman to be his wife, and now we have this sad story of their separation. By the way, we know about the story of the separation because at some point her father comes and takes her away. Takes her away from the camp. Concerning the woman, concerning her divorce. For he had taken a Cushite woman. What does this teach? It teaches that one may have a woman who is beautiful in appearance but not beautiful in deeds, or beautiful in deeds but not in appearance, but this one was beautiful in every respect. Okay? First of all, you see, the Midrash is very, very interested not in slandering her. It's interested in taking the story into a different way. Because we could say, oh, they were gossiping, Miriam and her brother Aaron were gossiping and saying, you know that woman that our brother took, and it could go that way. So the Midrash is very strict about saying she's an amazing, amazing woman. The Cushite woman, she is called Cushite because of her beauty, like one who calls his handsome son Cushi, so that the evil eye will not rule over him. For he had taken a Cushite woman, and now he divorced her. And now the question is, what is it that they are saying to each other? Okay, so first of all, the Midrash gave us a whole new story. And it's a whole new sad story of the separation of Moshe and Tzipporah, who is a Cushite, beautiful woman and beautiful virtues in the story. Like, why does he leave her? But let's just look for a moment, and then we'll stop and open it up for all of us to talk about. What do they say to each other, Miriam and Aaron? They say, it is not only, or did he not only speak with us? Why is God speaking only with Moshe? Aren't we, his brother and sister? We also have an experience of huge intimacy with the divine, of being prophetic in some kind of ways. Okay, so why is God speaking with him, and he's getting to be the top leader in this trio and not us? I mean, is that clear as a question? It's a very serious question. Did he not also speak with us? Yet we did not separate from the way of ordinary marital life. Now, this is sages. This is the beauty of Chazal, right? They want to get us conversing and get us thinking about this whole question of the sacred family life, sexuality, right? Miriam and Aaron are saying, wait a second, we're also prophets, we're also the leaders of this camp. We don't separate from our women. Does anybody want to comment about this? Very interesting story. Or shall we? Maybe I'll first finish it so you'll see what the Midrash says. It's outrageous. Suddenly, God revealed himself to them suddenly while they were impure through marital relationships, and they were crying out, water, water, to inform them that Moses acted properly in separating from his wife, since the divine presence reveals itself to him constantly, and there is no fixed time for speech. Okay, it's a kind of sharp midrash, but the end of the midrash in Sifrei is saying they had to understand something. Not everybody is the same thing and of the same capacity. Miriam is asking, right? Aren't we like Moshe? I mean, aren't we on the same level? And what Moshe does here what God does here is to say to them in a very sharp, sudden, and surprising way that they are not on the same league, that they're not in the same level of prophecy. And the level of prophecy of Moshe is called the level of prophecy that has no fixed time and place. So let me just say something about that because it's really interesting. I mean, the image here is crazy. It's as if in the moment of the sexual act of Miriam and her husband, and maybe Aaron and his wife, suddenly they get this state of revelation, and they understand from that Moshe is in a state where he never knows when the state of prophecy and of this totally altered state is going to come upon him. And they get this very physical, experiential understanding why he had to separate from his wife. But the idea that prophecy is not allocated or for a special place or for a special time or a special invocation or a special band of prophets like we have in the book of Samuel, or is a very, very fascinating one. Moshe is a person who is totally open to the divine, and it cannot be put into an orderly or bureaucratized structure. And that is why he separates from the mundane relationship in the world. That is Midrash, the Midrash of Sifrei as told by Rashi. We're going to read another Midrash, of course, but before that, let's stop. This is a very serious Midrash, okay? It's a Midrash that quotes all kinds of things. It's very creative. It brings a new story that is imaginative, that is brought into the places that Torah is totally silent about. And it raises all these ethical questions, all these interpersonal questions, all these questions about prophets, all these questions about siblings, all these questions about status. Can't we just have that everybody's going to be the same? No. Moshe is different from you. Yes, Robert.
Well, it's sort of the same thing we discussed that I discussed earlier. It looks like one of the differences is that God will speak to Miriam and Aaron in riddle, as opposed to the direct speech of this, newfound brahmachari that is, is speaking directly to God. I don't know what that means, other than it's not, obviously they're not the same.
Yeah, but it's almost a humorous, horrific way of saying it, that God is going to come upon them when they are in that state of, okay, let's talk about sex. You want to talk about sex? Let's talk about sex. And see what happens to you if you're going to have this kind of moment of religious openness like that, where you're going to be maybe burning and saying, water, water, like somebody bring me water, right? It's very, very wild kind of midrash that says, you want to understand the difference between you and your brother? Okay, let me show you the difference. And so that's, that's very. Yes, Bella.
I'm just wondering, were Aaron and Miriam jealous of the relationship between Moses and God?
Well, that's a very, very good way of also reading it when they say, why is God speaking with him and not with us? We're just as good, you know. We also have an intimation, we have a closeness. So it can be jealousy, it can be gossip, it can be curiosity that is critical, and it can be outright criticism. It can be outright criticism. And he's their little brother, remember. He's their little brother floating on the Nile in a basket. And he gets to be the Prince of Egypt, and he gets to be Egyptian. And then he kind of re-enters the fold of the children of Israel and becomes the leader. What about Aaron and Miriam? Yeah, Evan.
So I just find this really exciting because I've never heard.
So do I. Yeah.
So thank you for bringing this. I've never heard an interpretation of he married a Cushite as anything other than them speaking badly of Tzipporah, of saying like, oh, she's gross, and being like the idea that Miriam's like being racist and she just doesn't like that that her brother has married this woman. And so the idea that what they're actually saying when they say he married a Cushite is he married this beautiful woman and now he's neglecting her. What is he doing? Right. Is so interesting because it also then ties together, because otherwise the two things that they're reported as saying at the beginning here don't really have a connection other than, they're just criticizing and grumbling and saying negative things. But if it's like, what is he doing? He married this beautiful woman and now he's neglecting her. And and why is God only speaking to him? And then having the punchline of, here's why he's neglecting his wife, and here's why God only speaks to him. It's the same answer for both. It's because if God can come upon you at any time, you can't be ritually impure every night. And that's such an interesting, like, everything going together.
It's a very dense, amazing. I want to say, first of all, that was wonderful for me to choose it, because it just shows you also how daring rabbinic language is, right? We think, rabbinic language is all about laws, but look at this. This is an amazing story, right? It shifts, it builds up a whole question. All these dilemmas are suddenly brought to us by entering into these cracks in the verse and creating a whole new drama, which I think, by the way, is a very beautiful one. And where's Evan? Yeah. Oh, there you are. I hope you go to rabbinical school. Okay. Now.
Well, Tiana had her hand up.
Tiana, yeah. I'm happy to listen to it.
Hi. Thank you for bringing this. My question is about this whole notion of having a revelation come through sex to begin with here. Is this something that's common in Rashi's time, or is this something that's more common that they're pulling it from like some other place in the Torah? Or where are the sages getting this to begin with, this part?
I think it's a good question. I think it's part of the creative imagination of the midrashist, whoever it was, the anonymous midrashist that wrote this as a commentary of Sifrei, because it is very interesting to say, how do you explain that it's very difficult to be in such an open state and be totally in this world and in this other world? How will that be conveyed? And here it's conveyed almost, it's almost humorous, I must say. It is kind of, and outrageous, which they love being outrageous. which is also fun. But I think it's Sifrei. Sifrei has this idea. And Rashi, who's the big editor, meaning that he can choose, he can pick and choose, and it's going to determine what people know for centuries, what Jews are going to know. They're not going to go read Sifrei. They don't even know what it is, right? They're going to read Rashi as the accompaniment to Torah. Right? They're going to be learning Torah by reading it with Rashi, and so much so that for generations people are going to think that what's written in Rashi is what the Torah says. Because if Rashi says it, then it's Torah, right? Oh, you mean Abraham didn't break all those images and idols in his father's shop? We thought that's in Torah. No, it's because Rashi brings it as a midrash in his commentary. And here, this kind of story. It's because Rashi brings it into the commentary. Isn't that fascinating to understand that that's how we learn? All these other stuff gets thrown out because he chose to edit this story in. Yeah, but I think it's from Sifrei. I don't know. I mean, mine is a very powerful kind of allusion to mystical moments, right? Which is what happens in the story of the four who entered Pardes, but we're not going to get into that now. Val and Josh. Rega, you're muted, my dear Val.
I mean, this is a bit of a diversion, but could this be the proof text for the church, which is also coming into being in all of its...
In the time of Sifrei, right?
Exactly. So it's a proof text for the celibacy of priests, of those dedicated to God, the church, as the intermediaries. Intermediaries.
Well, we're just going to have to check that out in the fathers of
I say this only
because of the church.
Yeah, yesterday morning I was at a high funeral mass, instead of in shul, and so this has some resonance here.
Very interesting. By the way, very interesting question. Like, does this give legitimacy, or by the way, does this absolutely not give legitimacy for celibacy by making Moses the unique other and saying everybody else, we do not do the monastic way. We live with our wives, we live with our husbands, we have family lives, we have children, right? Moshe is a different story, but Moshe is a singular. So I would say there's so many places in Sifrei and in all of the midrashim of that time. That's why I think it's an excellent question what you're saying, that you can see that it's an open polemic with Christianity, because Rabbinic Judaism and Christianity are happening at the same time. Okay, these are two sister religions in a certain way. Suckling on the same ground language of Torah, of Tanakh, and reading it in very different ways. And the monastic question is a major point of division and conflict between Judaism and Christianity. Yes, Josh.
Yeah, Malila, could you just explain like what's going on in the Midrash where they're saying the water piece? I don't understand.
Well, you can read it, you can read it campy, you can read it bizarre, you can read it funny, you can read it very seriously. I think what they're saying, what it could mean is that when they're screaming out water, water, it might mean that they're in an ecstatic moment that they can't handle. They're like going to faint. They need water, right? And that's how they understand this whole thing with their brother. And the other way to read it is that it's a kind of allusion to water in the story of the four that entered Pardes, where Rabbi Akiva says, when you reach stones of marble that look like water, do not scream out in ecstasy, water, water. No, right? Because that won't be true. You have to contain yourself in the mystical state, and so you can take it seriously, and you can take it humoristically, and any direction you want to take it. It's pretty audacious. That's what's nice. Yes, Evan, and then I will continue.
I just had a different reading of it. I don't know if this is valid, but I had a reading of that you would you could purify yourself. I remember a story somewhere in Berachot where like the rabbi, like, oh, he's impure from a wet dream, and so he just jumps in the river real quick. And so it's the idea of like, oh, we're impure, give us water real quick so that we can purify and be pure before God.
Absolutely.
That's how I read it, like where are my pants kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You could read it absolutely that way. And the story in Brachot Bemet is also kind of humorous. Okay, just give me a sec, right? Because think of it, people were going around in a state of ritual impurity all the time. And if you wanted to stay pure, and they wanted to, because that was their language, that was, your state and altered state are pure or impure. That's the basic situations that every man and woman are in throughout their life, all the time. And you have to immerse yourself in water in order to be purified again. It can be a very short ritual impurity of less than 24 hours, right? So he said, oh, I'll just jump in, then I can go back and do my ritual right work in the camp. Yeah. So you're saying, maybe they're saying water, like, oh my God, we didn't know that this was going to happen to us. So, and we're in between these two states of the sexual maybe and the divine. I think it's a beautiful story. I don't think anybody's written about this story, which maybe some people have. Anyway, that was story number 1 for today. Amazing story. Now we are gonna go into the most formative midrash about Miriam, because when we meet her at the end of Be'alotcha, we're already, somebody asked her, like, you remember to talk about your brother, like they've been living with him a whole life, right? They've been going, so, but when she says, God also speaks with us, like, I know God intimately also. So I want us to read this midrash. It is on page 3 on the top. Okay, let's go. And his sister stood at a distance. Vatetatzav achoto merachok. Right? Miriam stood at a distance behind the rushes. What? Leida mayaseh, but to see what's going to happen to her little brother floating down the Nile. Right? Amazingly dramatic, tenuous moment. She, the sister, his older sister, rushes to the water. Okay, let's see what the Midrash says. Why did Miriam stand at a distance? Rav Amram said in the name of Rav, because Miriam was prophesying and saying, my mother is destined to give birth to a son who will save Israel. When Moses was born, the whole house was filled with light. Her father stood and kissed Miriam on her head and said to her, my daughter, your prophecy has been fulfilled. Okay? Very famous Agadah, very famous stories. Many of us have it in our Haggadot of Pesach, right? That want to bring Moshe back into the Haggadah and to bring Miriam more back into the Haggadah. We quote this story that that men and women stopped having conjugal relationships because they didn't want to have babies, because if you have a baby, a male child, he's going to be killed and thrown into the Nile. So let's not have babies. And then you have the story that she's prophesizing. Okay? So the young Miriam, the girl, has a prophecy. And she says it, and her parents take it seriously. She says, have a child. We're going to have a child who's going to be the redeemer of Israel. Right? And it's also playing with another midrash that says, Vayiru'u oto ki tov, that when he was born, they see that he's good, that he's fine. Maybe it means on a literal level that he has, 10 fingers and no tail or something. But the midrash reads it as tov, as filled with light, right? Because we have in the first chapter of Genesis, God sees the light, and God sees that the light is good. Tov. Vayar Elohim et haor ki tov. So they say light and goodness, and the whole room is filled with light. And the parents understand that they have a prophet daughter. They have a daughter who has the ability to prophesize. Okay? איזה יופי של סיפור. And then, but when he was cast into the Nile, her mother stood and struck her on the head and said to her, my daughter, where's your prophecy now, right? Where's your prophecy? This is what is written, and the sister stood at a distance to know what would be the end of her prophecy. These are beautiful. By the way, our tradition is filled with stories about Miriam because she is the third leader of this project of going through the desert for 40 years. This idea that you have all brothers, two brothers and a sister being the leaders of the camp, and that they each one have totally different characteristics that together, only together and in collaboration, can move the camp ahead, is an amazing idea. Right? We're in a world where there's a incredible tendency to centralist leadership now of a one person who's. It's so interesting to see that, in Russia, in America, in Israel, you can see it, right? And redemption in our story happens. Oh, look at that cat! That's so nice. It's so fascinating to see that the story is about three people, that you have to have different modes of leadership that only together can. By the way, is it stormy? Is it already very stormy again in your... Yeah, it is.
Yes,
it is.
it is. Yes.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to show me what it looks like outside of the window when we finish this, because that's really interesting. Wow. I don't think...
Quick look.
I don't think I've ever been in so much snow in my life. So, yeah, that's amazing. Wow. Makes me cold. Okay. Rega, are we okay with concentration? Do we need a break? Do we need questions? Do we need... we have very little time, though. Like, I'll just close my soup here. I'm on my way to America on Wednesday night. And happily, I will not be touching down on the northeastern airports. I'm going straight to LA, which is much nicer. So that was the first take about Miriam, and I wanted to bring it in so that we can understand how the voices in rabbinics go. built her up as a prophetess. Prophetess? How do you say that? I don't know. Prophetess. And also because in Torah it says, Vatikach Miriam HaNeviah. She is called in Torah a prophet. So it's not that she's talking with her brother and saying, it's not only with Moshe that God speaks. He speaks with me, right? And he does. And here's the beautiful story of how he speaks with her, that she knows about the child who's going to be born. That's take number one. And now look at a very, very different rabbinic take. The rabbis say, this is, Rav said the first story that we just read, and then Rabbanan Amrei means, but the general take of the sages was that this entire verse is spoken in reference to the Holy Spirit. She stood in reference to, and the Lord came and stood. His sister in reference to the verse, say to wisdom, you are my sister. At a distance in reference to from afar, the Lord appeared to me. To know what would be done to him in reference, for the Lord is a God of knowledge. Okay? I'm not sure it's a beginner's midrash, but what's very beautiful about it is that whereas Rav is reading into the story and trying to understand where were the moments of prophecy in the life of Miriam, the rabbis are reading it in a very different way. Is that the Holy Spirit, or the Shekhinah, is the one of whom the verse and his sister stood from afar to see what will happen to little Moses in his basket floating on the Nile. That's a very, I don't know what would be the... First of all, it's to show you that it's a totally different reading. It's not about a story. It's saying, no, this is not a human story. This is a verse that, if we know how to read it, is just intimating that this is a moment that the Holy Spirit, right, the Shekhinah, is in that place. And that all the words in the verse that relate to Miriam can also find proof texts in the Bible that they relate to Ruach HaKodesh, to God. So it's divinity in a certain way standing there waiting to see what will happen. Okay, behind the scenes of what's happening on the Nile. Totally different kind of midrash. I have a lovely cousin just walked in. Yeah, I'm like, first take your nice wonderful room to the left and to the right. All right. Okay. So there we go. Okay. Does anybody want to say something about this story? Did you know these stories about Miriam? Like, are these famous stories? Do they appear? Did you, or what do you think about them? What do you think about the story that she's a prophetess from a very young age, right? She's a child prophet. Any comment, any emotion that it awakens, or... Yes, John.
It's fascinating that this midrash talks about divinity itself waiting to see what's going to happen.
Right.
That presumably God knows everything in one sense, but on the other hand is waiting to see how humans act, to see how the story is going to turn out.
There's a yofi. Beautiful. Just beautiful. I could never have said it more beautifully. Thank you. Again, that's the immanent. The presence of the divine is in this world. Like, we have to see what's going to happen. What are going to be the choices? Who's going to go down to the Nile to wash? So, יפה מאוד. So, רגע, I still have a few things I want us to read. And then, we'll just, okay. So look at the continuation of that page. I chose a beautiful other midrash, very different. Midrash Tanchuma, which is a little later than Midrashei Rabbah. Midrash Exodus Rabbah is a very late midrash, but here's a midrash, I think from the 6th or 7th century. And look what it says. And the people did not journey until Miriam was gathered in. Remember, 7 days. Nobody was willing to move and say, oh, they're going to catch up or something. This honor was granted to her by the Omnipresent in return for the single hour that she waited for Moses when he was cast into the Nile, as it is said, and his sister stood at a distance. She delayed for 1 hour, and all of Israel delayed on her account for 7 days. איזה יופי, לא? We want to have more midrashim like that. They're so beautiful. נכון? She's so beloved. Miriam is so beloved by the people. Nobody's willing to move before she joins the camp, because she's a blessing in the camp. She's a huge. It's a very moving statement also of this midrash. On the one hand, they build it on the kal v'chomer, on the similarity between her standing there and the people standing waiting for her. Right? She stood for Moses. We'll stand for you, Miriam. Eze yofi. Right? That it becomes modeling stories. Okay.
Malila,
sorry.
It also strikes me as, it often seems that the rabbis, in their way, are trying to sweeten or make less harsh the biblical text, which in the way they interpret things, and this strikes me as them doing that here. Like it could have just, if you just read the Torah text, it can come across quite harsh, and she's punished, and okay, let her be sent out if her father spat in her face and so forth. And this is like a very different imagining.
Absolutely.
Of like, it's this, the honoring of her from the people, and
but
it really shifts the orientation.
That's exactly the radicalness of midrashic imagination. It's not for nothing that we're rabbinic Jews, they were great. Klamar, the ability, or I would say it this way, as a person who teaches Torah and teaches midrash and teaches Zohar, I think the main thing that we have to learn from all these is that we have to learn so that we can have the sense of freedom and legitimacy that these people have about going into our sacred stories and changing them sometimes, 180 degrees around. And saying, no, it's insufficient. I don't like the way the story ended. I'm going to make up another ending. I do not like the way, this sentence is happening. You cannot discard of the sentence because, the partiture, the words of Torah have to stay the same. But the sky is the limit in interpretation. You can take it, but you have to be artistic about it. You have to know how to do it. You have to know how to use that tool but there's no question that what you're saying is what's happening here. Somebody wants to say, what? we're going to be left with the image of Miriam being somebody whose father spits in her face for something bad that she's done. It's, first of all, so Flintstones, like, come on, you know. Second of all, we love Miriam. So we're just going to do that. We're going to find 2 verses. We're going to bring together another Agadah. And sometimes the sages do the opposite. They do a rereading in order to take somebody who's kind of an okay character and totally kill him, right? Like Esau. I mean, Esau, he's not such a bad guy in Torah. He's a very interesting, red-headed, twin. He's the twin. My God, it's like they didn't leave one stone unturned in blaspheming and turning him into anathema, right? Because he is Rome. He became a symbol of Rome. And the moment Esau became a symbol of Rome and then a symbol of Christianity, it's like all the gates of hell are open. You're allowed to take any word, any letter in the story of Esau and show how bad he is. So you can the creativity can go in any direction. And the question is, which ones do we choose that we see as, our living waters, kind of. And we have to continue this tradition in many ways. That's what I would say. So I would like us to look for a moment at the next Midrash, and it's Zohar. And in English, it appears on page number 4. Page number 4. It says Zohar 3, 181b. Do you see that? Which means Zohar volume 3, page 181 on the second side of the page. Here's Zohar. This is the end of the 13th century. And look at the way they write it. Come and see. There was no generation in the world like the generation in which Moses stood in the world together with Aaron and Miriam. Right? They don't blaspheme their generation. It's the opposite. The Zohar loves the generation of the desert. There were 3 siblings, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, as it is said, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, right? They're called the 3 shepherds. 3 shepherds. Miriam the moon, Moses the sun, and Aaron the right arm. Fortunate is the portion of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam who are present in the world. Wow. Okay? That's a different language, okay? It's a different type of midrash, but it's saying in the language of Zohar, we're not going to get into all of it, but it's saying these 3 characters, Moses, Miriam, and Aaron, are not only human beings, they also have a transpersonal aspect. Okay? They are embodying in our world certain aspects of divinity, which are in the language of the Kabbalists. Okay, and they're going to say Miriam is the representative and manifestation of Shekhinah, the feminine aspect of the divine in our world, and Moses is the sun, he's Tiferet. He is the embodiment of the quality of splendor, of structure, of vision, and that's the Sphira of Tiferet. And Aaron is the embodiment of the right arm or the right side of the Sphirot, which is a divine attribute of chesed, of love. Okay, of love. So the sun and the moon and the right arm are a very different language. It's very poetic, it's very terse, it's very mythical. I would say also it's very mystical, but not necessarily, it depends who's reading. But to say, we, the mystics, when we read the story of Miriam and Moses and Aaron, we read it through a lens that they're the embodiment of these divine qualities in the camp of Israel. So that's one. And Rega, let me continue because I think you're gonna. Okay. And then the next Zohar, okay? We have learned 3 supernal gifts were bestowed upon Israel through 3 siblings, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. The manna by the merit of Moses. The clouds of glory, right, which are the shade that accompanies the people walking through the harsh desert. The clouds of glory by merit of Aaron. The well of water that travels with the people by the merit of Miriam. And all of them are held fast above. And then, I don't think we have time to do all this. And then the Midrash goes to say, take me seriously. I'm going to find a verse for each one of these attributes. Okay? I'm not going to go into all of them because we don't have the time for that. But I want to say, if you look at the end of the you see it says, the well is by the merit of Miriam, for she is indeed called a well. That's very Zoharic to say. Of course, Miriam is the well. Miriam is Shekhinah. But I wanted to bring these Zohars to say that in so many generations, different interpreters take so seriously the idea of this trio as a gift. That it's only because they are 3 and that they're interconnected in this special way that the people of Israel merit these 3 gifts that get them through this interim period, which is so formative, which is, manna, you need water, you need food, and you need shade. You can't get through the desert without them. And these 3 are the embodiment, or they sparkle with that gift, right? And Miriam is the great gift of water, right? And Bemet, in the next parashot, when she dies, that's what the Torah says, Vatamot Miriam velo hayu mayim laeda. And Miriam died, and there was no water found for the community. Because she is the living water. She is that presence of the miraculous well that traveled with the people. So, there's a few other texts here. You can read them at your, free time. But I just wanted to bring these midrashim as gifts because I think they're just so beautiful, and they're so they kind of open our mind to imagine ways of reading and ways of imagining and ways of thinking about siblings and ways of thinking about prophecy, ways of thinking about leadership, ways of thinking of the different gifts that each type of leader can have. And that's kind of the end of our journey. And I just want to know if anybody wants to say something or ask something. It was kind of delicious to play with just a few verses from the Parsha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you. It was quite a
I am
Yes.
thinking of we've talked about the midrash and this kind of exploration as peeling back the layers of the onion.
Right.
And so I think we have a Vidalia onion for those of you who are in America. It's the sweet onion that grows in the South, as opposed to the one that stings our eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank
I
Yes.
have a
Yes, Brian.
yes, I have a comment. The gift of prophecy is recognized by, I guess, all of Israel was given to Miriam. And she was pretty much elevated and lifted as a leader of Israel. Why was that not taken as a precedent for women to become rabbis on co-equal?
First of all,
Seriously,
it was. First of all, it was. And by the way, you have to remember, I mean, I'm saying this as an Israeli who's totally, איך קוראים לזה, in deep appreciation of our sisters in America, who were the first to say, let's elevate the whole image of Miriam and turn her into being the sister image of Elijah in Havdalah, right? We sing of her. Let's put a special cup for her on the Seder table. Let's make a big deal of her. Let's get our timbrels. Let's understand what is this kind of leadership that has to do with dance and song and sing and caring. Yeah. America did it way before everybody else. And it's very beautiful. Yeah.
But it was 2,000 years before there was a female rabbi ordained. And
Yeah. Well,
I just think that is, I mean, the rabbis are always looking for precedent. Well, there it is in glaring gold. I mean,
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's very beautiful. But patriarchy is very strong.
yeah.
And it took a long time to crack that one. Think of it. Look at it. When were the first women rabbis, right?
Yeah.
So, what, 1933 in Berlin? I was like,
Right, and then not until
unbelievable.
72
Unbelievable.
or 73,
Yeah.
Yeah.
America.
Yeah. But yeah, right? We
Yeah,
have to
but,
reread our stories and put ourselves into the stories and into the characters. And yeah, I bless you all that you have many more years of having Torah as a tree of life. Now that Tu B'Shvat is coming soon, that we'll have an experience of that as a tree of life. And it was a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you, Josh, for inviting me.
Thank you.
Toda Rabah.
Bye, safe next week.
Yes.
And I hope you all defrost and that the sun will come out. And
Tomorrow, as
Yeah.
Annie would say.
תודה רבה.
תודה רבה.
Many thanks. Yeah, that's great.
להתראות.
להתראות.
יישר כוח.
Yes, Koa. Okay.